Hey there, I'd like to welcome you to Inputs Outputs On Demand, KeyCode Media's series giving you short technical tutorials for production, post, and the audiovisual industries. I'm your host, Jeff Sangpil, Chief Technologist here at KeyCode Media. Our partners at Panasonic have an exciting new live production switcher, which is fully 2110 native. It's called the Panasonic KAIROS. We'll be joined today by Harry Patel, Engineering Manager at Panasonic, to look at this new awesome leap forward in studio production. Let's get to it. Yeah. Harry, thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us what KAIROS is? Show us more about it.
Absolutely, Jeff. Nice to meet you. Hello, my name is Harry Patel. I'm the head of engineering for Panasonic. KAIROS overall is a platform that allows you to do quite a lot of things, but ultimately is a platform that's built on IP technologies. You have ability to bring in cameras via IP sources or SDI sources. Along with, you can control things from the platform itself, so you can control robotics or playback devices. And then at the end of the day, pretty much spit out a rendered output to projection screens, LED, or even streaming, and all of that occurs with only 1 frame of a delay from input to output. The very first application of this platform is a live production switcher. Now, when you look at live production switchers, the typical approach has been what is shown on the left-hand side is you have a specialized hardware that is FPGA based. You take the video inputs, bring it into the FPGA, process it, and then send it out. Now, of course, with the transition of IP, some of the other vendors, what they have done is they have taken an SDI source, converted to IP, taken an IP source, convert to baseband video, but still they're pushing it into an FPGA core. Panasonic's approach is a little bit different here. What Panasonic is doing is taking that IP source and feeding it straight into CPU, GPU defined technology that is really driven by software. What it allows us to do is a little bit more flexible, a little bit more scalable, and ultimately offer a product, a live production switcher that has no real restrictions on MEs or keyers, and we'll talk about that as we go further. But to give you an introduction, what components that KAIROS is made up of. So you have the KAIROS core, which is 1RU or 2RU hardware server. Then you have the KAIROS creator, which is the UI, ultimately the driving point for the switcher. So all of your production will require a UI instance. And then you have the KAIROS control panel, which is a physical control panel. Looks like a 2ME style panel, but it's a lot more than that. Quite flexible, quite scalable. Now, just to sort of give you an overview on the key benefits of KAIROS. So again, it's GPU and CPU technologies that we are using. So pretty much ultimately, we are able to code the software on top of it and make it as flexible as we like it. All of the video processing that you see within KAIROS is uncompressed, although we do support some compressed feeds going in and out of KAIROS. The latency from input to output within KAIROS is only 1 frame. So again, from video coming in to video going out is all within 1 frame of a processing delay. Ultimately, have unlimited number of video layers. Now, typical switcher terminology is keyers and MEs. We have moved on to a layer-based processing engine that allows us to be completely scalable, flexible, fully customizable in terms of your video production. And of course, in terms of the sources, the types of sources that you can bring into the switcher, 2110, 12G, 3G of course, HDMI, NDI, RTSP, RTP, SRT, pretty much mix and match everything that you want to bring in and out. So to give you an overview in terms of how would you utilize this in your productions, how would you design a system around this? So at the core, what you would have is an IP pretty much a network switch, right? So that network switch is high bandwidth network switch. It could be multiple of network switches, ultimately allowing you to bring in sources in an IP fashion. So a 100 gig network switch that has sources, let's say, defined on the left-hand side. So you have, for example, a Panasonic studio camera that has 2110 output that can go straight into the network switch. Or if you have sources that are SDI based, you could use converters and convert them before it comes into the IP environment. Now, there are a variety of vendors that make these sort of modules and gateways. Riedel, Evertz are just a few. The network switches that you see could be provided by either Mellanox, Arista, Cisco. Pretty much ultimately anybody who is a 2110 compliant, and works with PTP version 2 would be able to, you would be able to use their network switches. So now imagine that you have a network full of your sources, which are available again on the network switch as a multicast stream, part of 2110. On that network, now you're attaching pretty much a single core of Kairos connected via 100 gig bandwidth. And on that 100 gig, now you are able to bring in up to 32 3G inputs and up to 20 3G outputs. If you need more, you just pretty much add these cores, and now you will be able to do multiple productions at the same time. So what we are offering here is a quite scalable, quite flexible platform, this is just the beginning for us.
Very cool. You've got a demo, I think, prepared for us out of your facility in New Jersey.
Yeah, Jeff. So we have a lab set up in Harrison, New Jersey. So again, today I'm working from home, controlling the switcher completely remotely. We had to put this lab together in the middle of a pandemic, to continue to do our demos and explain our products to customers. So at the heart of this lab is Kairos. All the demos that we do from it is being driven by this particular system that you see. So to give you a little bit more visual, what we have placed here in our lab is a couple of monitors. So you have the multi-view monitors on the top, and then you have the additional outputs, so to say, to see the actual outputs of what the Kairos is doing. The multi-view monitors are configured in two different aspect ratios. So you have one on the left is a 16:9 production, one on the right is a 32:9 production. So what we are showing is that, let's say if you have a facility there where you have to drive iMag and also an LED backdrop at the same time, Kairos can drive both of those displays from a single platform. And not just limited to just 2 displays, but up to a total of 16 outputs that are 3G that you can mix and match and make a combination of whatever the resolutions that you like with our canvas feature. So that 32:9 that you see in the top right multi-view, that's what's shown on the bottom monitor. So there you have the pretty much 32:9 left and 32:9 right, showing you how that processing is actually working. The Kairos control, the physical control panel that you see, is the control panel that looks like a 2ME style panel, but it's a lot more than that. The creator, which is the UI, that's what you see on the right bottom side of the image, and that is what I'm controlling remotely. The Kairos creator is a software-based UI. You will require a license for it, and pretty much you can have as many as you like. Going a bit further, let me quickly also show you how the hardware is laid out in our racks. So again, we have multiple racks there, but the image, the rack that you see on the left hand side has the comparison of input to output latency. So what you see on the top right is the actual source coming from the Aja Keypro, and what's on the left hand side is the output of Kairos, showing you input to output latency of only 1 frame. Now, the hardware choices from Panasonic is there are 2 different hardware. There's the KC100 and then the 2RU is KC1000. Ultimately, the difference is the amount of layers you can process within a given switcher. So if you're looking at, let's say, a 2ME equivalent switcher, you would be happy with a KC100. But if you need to do more, drive more screens, drive more layers, you would potentially utilize KC1000. Now, of course, we pretty much have all of our I/O coming in on 2110. But for those scenarios where you still need to bring in sources via SDI, we have these DeltaCast modules. So what you see on the bottom of the image is the SDI input and output gateway modules that you can bring in and out without sort of the complexity of IP. So this is another option for you to bring sources directly into the core, but again, bypassing the completely network infrastructure and going straight in as an SDI source. So you are able to bring in up to 32 3G sources, bidirectional input or output. So let's say if you were to build just an SDI switcher, you can do something like 24 in and 8 out without even getting into the IP domain. But at the same time, if you want to get into the IP domain in the future, that 100 gig connection on the core is still available, and you can scale as you go. Looking at the bottom of the rack, you have a few other components there. So the first thing you will see is the PTP sync generator. That's from Leader. Typical 2110 environment requires a sync generator. That's what we have here. So Leader provides pretty much our PTP Grandmaster clock source, but at the same time it outputs Junlock to non-2110 sources as well. So let's say if you have UU150 as our PTZ camera, if you want to still bring it in via SDI, you can use that same clock to sync and ensure that it comes into the switcher in sync without needing to enable frame sync. By the way, if you do need to enable frame sync, every single input that we have within switcher has ability to enable frame sync. Now the switch that you see below is from Mellanox. Again, could be from Cisco or Arista, but this particular switch has 48 25 gig ports and 8 100 gig ports. On the switch, what you see are these modules that are from Riedel, ultimately taking an SDI source, converting it to 2110, and then 2110 back to SDI. Now, ultimately, what you are seeing here is, let's say, if you have a PTZ camera, for example, what you're looking at is that UE150, as the camera source, outputting SDI, going into that Riedel module, converting it to 2110. Now, when that SDI is converted into a 2110 stream, it's multicast by design, right? So now that 2110 stream is available on that network switch as a multicast source, which I can take it to any destinations or to as many destinations as I like. Ultimately, your network switch is your router, so to say. Now, when it's a router, you can take it out to any of the output modules, or let's say to a 100 gig side, attach another network switch or attach another core, and now you can make that source available pretty much anywhere on that network. So quite flexible, quite scalable, and in a way also decentralized video production. You don't necessarily need to bring all of your video sources into a single core. Now you can completely decentralize your video connections like you do with IP. And the very last thing that you see is our Gigabit Ethernet. Pretty much the Gigabit Ethernet is for control. So KAIROS Creator, KAIROS Control, all the compressed streamings like NDI, SRT, RTSP, RTMP, all of them are on a Gigabit side of things. So there are two different networks that you would need to manage. Pretty much, you would have compressed and control, and then uncompressed, which is the 2110 side of things.
Okay, so I do know from us receiving our KAIROS panel, the control panel is about 20 pounds, nice and easy to move around, but not too small, so you're not going to knock it around on a counter. Harry, can we talk about how you configure the inputs and outputs for the setup?
Absolutely, Jeff. So here in our UI, which is again the KAIROS Creator, there are several things that you can do. Pretty much, not just several things, but anything that you want to do in the switcher, you would do it through the UI. UI will be a big component of your production. The control panel is there pretty much for the duration of the show, but to program anything and everything within the switcher, the UI is going to be the heart of it. So within the Creator, you have several tabs here that you can easily access. Of course, if I need to check my input settings or output settings, I would simply go into my inputs. As I was mentioning earlier, KAIROS has 32 3G inputs, and those inputs could be anything that you want it to be. So it could be 2110, SDI being the DeltaCast modules that was mentioned earlier. NDI, that is native NDI. NDI-HX is not supported in KAIROS. Stream includes SRT, RTMP, RTSP, or RTP. Pretty much compressed streams that you can bring in. So the 32 inputs that you see here, all of them could be uncompressed. When it comes to compressed, we are supporting 2 channels of NDI and up to 8 channels of the compressed streams. On the output side, very similar, again, up to 20 outputs. You choose the interface on how you want to output, and you define the resolution of what you want to output. So on the input side, it doesn't care what resolution the source is coming in. It could be 1080p, 1080i, 30p, UHD, 720. Pretty much a variety of sources can come in. Switcher can accept it without any issue. If the source coming in, again, is not in sync, it will enable a frame sync. On the output side, you have a scaler built in. So every single output could be different resolution. And you choose from the drop down what resolution you would like to have.
So Harry, you mentioned that KAIROS has no restrictions on MEs and keyers. Can you show us how that gets achieved?
Absolutely, Jeff. So in the Kairos Creator, there are several tabs here under Mixer pane that you see here. The first one is actually Control. Now, this is where you have a soft deck for control, which has two decks that you can place. Now, pretty much in a typical scene, you would have your program, your preview, your transition selection buttons, cut auto, and a soft fader. And again, you have two of those decks, so you can really program it to be a 2ME style switcher, or you can control any of the scenes. Now you may ask, what's a scene? So before we go into the scenes, let's review in terms of specifications of a typical production switcher. So a typical production switcher's, the specs you would consider is, how many MEs does it have? How many keyers does it have? Does it have a macro function? Does it have short memory and so on? And the reason why you're asking that question is because for whatever the production that you are trying to prepare, you need to build different effects and looks like 2-box and 4-box and lower thirds and side cards. So all of these effects, if that's our end goal, why do we need to worry about MEs and keyers? And instead, why not move to a layer-based processing engine? And that's what Kairos is offering here. So under scenes, there are, pretty much scene is pretty much, what you see here is a 16:9 is a scene. Kairos meeting is another scene. 32:9 is a scene. A scene could be considered as an output display, right? So what are the displays that I'm powering with this particular switcher? So I could be powering, let's say, an LED screen or a remote meeting. That's what the feed that you're looking at right now. And feeding into this particular output are my different scenes here that you see. So for example, GUI multi-view 1, multi-view 2 is another scene that I'm feeding out. Now, if you like to insert a new scene, click on Insert, New Scene, give it a name, and then choose how many layers would you like to have in addition to the background layer. Now, layer is sort of like your keyer. Only difference is you can have as many as you like. You can start with 6, but then later on you can add or remove a layer as you require it. You're not limited to any fixed number of layers. So, for example, in this scene, GUI multi-view 1, multi-view 2, that particular scene, of course, you can now realize that it's something that you can rename. These are my layers. So I have my background layer, a GUI layer, left layer, right layer. I will send this scene to you in a minute. But point is that these layers can be renamed. Any source that you would like to assign, simply right-click on it, select source, and then choose the source that you would like to have. So you can choose pretty much any scene in input, effects inputs, RAM players, clips, clip players, stills, color mats, graphics channels, or internal resources like multi-view 1 and multi-view 2. Now, below what you see here is our cross points for that particular layer. So I can go in and define that cross point to be whatever I want it to be. If you need only certain amount of sources on that particular layer, you can go in and customize that very easily. Any other settings that you may want to do, it's available on the right hand side. So for example, if you like to change resolution of that layer, you can do so here. If you need to apply crop, if you need to change the size of it, corner pinning, luminance key, chroma key, if you want to add a border to a source, or any variety of these effects, including color correction, could be added to any layer in quantities of as many as you like. So what you see, for example, this left scene, actually, before I do that, let me send you this scene so you would be able to follow as I'm doing things. So that's where we have our scene, which is, again, we have the UI and then the multi-view 1 and multi-view 2 that's placed as a pip. If you want to reposition, let's say, that particular pip, you would go to that layer and just simply drag it and move it around. If you want to change the size of it, you change the size of it. By the way, Control Z also works in a production switcher, which is kind of handy to have. Changing sources to, let's say, that particular pip, again, that crossbar that you see below has a variety of sources already listed. So you can simply go on and enable, change your sources to however, whatever you want it to be. Now, if, let's say, director says, could you give me a transition in that pip? Normally, you would have to take an ME, bring that into another ME, and, pretty much it gets a little bit of a cumbersome to actually achieve a simple transition. In this switcher, you have two options. You can go into the drop-down menu for advanced and select either enable a B bus. So once you enable a B bus, now pretty much that layer is acting as an ME on its own, and you can have your program preview, do any transitions that you like to have, or enable a dissolve. So when I enable the dissolve, I can select any effect that's available in the system. I can select a mix effects, a wipe effect, a DVE effect, or a user effect like a replay wipe. So let's actually take a look at that with the replay wipe. So it's already selected. I will hit OK. And that dissolve will happen with 100 frames of a transition time. So now that I have checked this dissolve, and when I take my next source, what you will see is instead of just cuts, I will actually have a replay wipe traveling, giving me pretty much a complete flexibility on any transitions that I would like to program. So imagine a control panel, you have your crossbar, you can simply punch through it and your transitions will just happen. Now giving you a little bit more complicated scene. So let's say here is my 32:9. Now 32:9 scene is actually what you see on the upper right. What you see is in the upper right. So there we have several things programmed for you. So pretty much we have our 3 different boxes. So we have our right box, center box, and left box. And then below there is a background that's coming from Aja Key Pro, and 3 different text title overlays that are placed. Right. So you can imagine the pretty much how complex you can make all the scenes, or how flexible you can be. Now, when I look at these layers are part of pretty much a container. So any effects that I would like to do, I can simply click on a group of layers together, not just to an individual layer. So for example, if I want to take that center box and move it around, I can do that. And as I move it, again, I'm moving 3 different layers at the same time. So overall, in terms of compositing your scenes, you are quite sort of flexible. And again, in terms of resolution, we support up to 32 megapixel of a canvas. This is simply just a 32:9, which is 3840 by 1080. And again, we are driving that output like you would on a typical production switcher, right? So you can do any number of MEs, you can do any number of layers. You can pretty much do all of that with only 1 frame of latency input output.
Very cool. It seems like the only thing it won't do is order lunch for the crew. What are the
It will do that for you.
Oh, okay. That's even better. What other resources does the system have built in?
Well, Jeff, there are several other things that the switcher has built in. So let's take a look and see what are some of those resources. So we have ability to load stills right within the switcher. Pretty much all of these stills that you see are uncompressed and have ability to play back instantaneously. So pretty much you can bring in your normal PNG, JPEG, JPEG, and TIFF, and so on. Switcher will convert to uncompressed, the Panasonic's proprietary format in .rr extension. Once it's loaded into the switcher, you can now load it into the system RAM. So the reason why we require all of these stills to be loaded into the system RAM is pretty much, let's say when you want to use any of these resources, and when you push that cross point or move that T-bar, we want that instant to be available instantaneously without any delay. Some of the other CPU, GPU based switchers, what we are seeing is when you push the button, the actual recall of that resource takes a while because it has to get decoded first and then come into the video path. Here, it's available for instantaneous playback without any delay. So the still storage that you see here, the RAM capacity that we have within the switcher is total of 12 gig. But again, that's just the active RAM that you're using. What the total storage available for all of the media is 181 gigabyte. So that is your still, also your motion clips. So these here are pretty much uncompressed motion clips that you want to use for your production, right? That is different than your compressed clip players. So we also have normal compressed clip players that you can play back directly from the switcher. The RAM player that you see here is all uncompressed, could be utilized to attach to, let's say, replay wipes or any backgrounds that you want to have within your production, or bugs and so on. So anything that you would typically use in your production, you would pretty much upload the media into your RAM players, while anything that you may need for long form playback, let's say that could be an intro, opening video, your ending video, or commercial breaks, and so on. So pretty much compressed media here allows you to play back natively H.264, AVC Intra, DNX HD. Very soon will be ProRes. So multiple formats are supported. You can bring them directly into the switcher, make a pretty much a playlist, and then play them out. There are 2 channels of these supported. Now, the uncompressed media that you see here, pretty much there is no number of fixed channels. You can use to the capacity of the actual RAM. Now, again, all of these sources could be used as a source directly onto a layer. You don't necessarily need to pass it through a RAM channel. Pretty much allowing you to pretty much, assign any of the internal storage to any layer, without any restriction, as long as it's loaded into the system RAM. Few of the things that we have built in are color backgrounds. Typically, you can have, for example, here a color background could be made up of any of the 2 colors. If you like to, let's say, change the softness between that blend, you can do so here. If you need to pretty much move the position of where that blend is occurring, or if you want to enable a spin. So all of these backgrounds could be generated directly into the switcher, and that is pretty much all additional tools that are available without costing a resource on anything else. You can have hundreds of these color backgrounds generated. We also have ability to provide you with a few dynamic backgrounds. So there is a pattern, hexagon pattern shape. There's a star field, and then there's also rays. Rays looks like pretty much a moving light, pretty much on the stage backdrop, giving you a soft wash. And you can also change the color of it and so on. So you have quite flexibility. A few of the things that I would like to show you are our ability to control and pretty much trigger things within the switcher and outside of the switcher. So here we have ability to send HTTP or IP based commands directly from switcher to the outside world. Pretty much anything that receives HTTP or IP commands. So let's say you want to move your robotic system, open curtains, trigger a light, variety of things that could receive HTTP or IP. What we are doing is we are controlling the Panasonic robotic systems directly from the switcher. So as you, let's say, recall a macro, you want the robotic system to be in a particular position. We also have ability to control Panasonic PTZ cameras directly from the switcher. So here you can control PTZ, recall presets. Of course, you would be able to trigger tally on them. So the studio cameras and PTZ cameras, we integrate with tally over IP as well as TSL 5.0 protocol for tally. So you are able to trigger tally directly from the switcher. And then pretty much one of the last things that I would like to talk about is multi-views. So we have ability to pretty much generate 2 multi-views directly from the switcher. Multi-view 1, multi-view 2, again, those are the multi-views that you see on the top part of the image. Each of these multi-views are completely scalable and flexible, so you can resize them, put any source on them. You can make it a program, a preview. Additionally, if you like to add any of these additional functions like, let's say analog clock, digital clock, GPU meter, or a countdown clock, all of these could be fully customizable. There are 10 factory defined presets that the switcher is supplied with, but then as a user, you can save up to 12 of these different presets. So overall, those are the things that are built into the KAIROS.
Harry, thanks for taking the time to show it to us. If you as the audience have any questions, please submit them in the YouTube chat or the Facebook chat, and we'll do our best to get those answers back to you.